Hello and welcome to the India Hangout. Are we as a country heading for blackouts? Well, that's a very tough or a strong statement to make, but the reason we're asking this is because coal levels at most, or rather many power stations in India are now at 1 week levels, as in they will run out of coal in a week if they don't get fresh supplies. That's almost 50 of the 100 plus thermal power plants. About 27, as we understand it, are down to 4 days of coal. What all this means is that you could suddenly lose power in some parts of the country, and it may not be easy to get that situation back on track as always. So let's try and understand what's happening in the power sector in general, and what could actually make it worse, and then finally what could make it better. For that, I'm joined by three experts: Adi Engineer, former Managing Director of Tata Power; R.P. Singh, who's now chairman of IIT in Guwahati, and also Soma Banerjee, an energy expert with the CII. Mr. Singh, let me begin with you. If I may request you to respond to this to a lay audience, how do you define the current power situation in this country in as much as continuity and predictability of supply is concerned?
Look here, first of all, I totally differ with you that India is heading for a blackout. This is not for the first time that we have coal shortage and coal problem. These have all been handled in the past, and it will be handled, and maybe in a better way. The reason being, we have a strong national grid, and power can be, sent from one corner of the country to the other corner of the country. So it is wrong to say that we are heading for a blackout. Yes, we are a deficit state. We have shortage of electricity. Demand and supply gap is there. We are trying our best to mitigate this issue, and therefore a lot of generation plants have come up. Somehow, in last 5 to 10 years, the transmission line, the way it should have come, especially in last 5 years, it has not come up, whether central level or state level. The government is taking action on it. In fact, if I am not wrong, till the previous month, certain regions were surplus in power and certain regions were suffering for want of power. But because transmission line is not there, so power was not reaching there. After interconnection of western and southern region, the things will improve in southern region.
So, and you're saying that the power situation, the ability of the power plants to supply power, which in turn is based on coal, is something that is not something to worry about, at least from your point of view.
Let me tell you, I won't say it is not to be worried. We should be worried. We should act, and we should act, in fact, not only fast, we should act super fast. But it doesn't mean that we are heading for a blackout. It will be blackout. It is totally, I can't digest as a power engineer. I worked with NTPC. I was chairman Power Grid for 12 years. I was the other day with the private company. So it is unfair to say that we are heading for a blackout. Let's not sensitize.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Engineer, let me come to you. A few days ago in the city of Mumbai, we had a power trip. Now, it is pretty normal for many other parts of the country, but in Mumbai, it's unusual. Now, which also raised questions. I think Anand Mahindra of Mahindra tweeted saying that we are already facing coal shortages, and this, in some ways, is a suggestion that of what lies ahead. What is your sense, Mr. Engineer? Why was this stripping something specific and not related to coal? And to what extent is coal a larger concern, considering that even in the case of Tata Power, most of your generation was through thermal power?
Govind, I think we are looking at the small pieces without looking at the big picture, because you and I have been discussing this power scenario for at least the last 15 years. I would say that if you are looking at the crisis, you should really look upon it as an energy crisis. Every power plant is only converting primary energy, whether it is oil, gas, or coal, into power. And today, the biggest problem is an energy crisis in India. We know that monsoons take their toll every year in mining, and we could easily prepare for this in advance. But the entire coal availability in India is hinged only on what Coal India can produce, which, as you know, a state-held entity. So we have a question of efficiencies and improving the coal sector basically to be able to meet the requirements that are expected of it. Added to that, the burgeoning requirements of energy need coal from other resources. India cannot meet the entire resources of power generation. And coal-based energy will continue to be the backbone of power generation, because wind, solar and all are welcome, but they can't give you 24/7 power. And therefore we have to turn to other global sources of power like imported coal. But when it comes to sourcing energy from abroad, we have to be able to pay the prices of imported coal. What's happening, our policies are not pragmatic. When we come to coal-based power plants that are based on imported coal, we still quibble about the tariffs and want to, get coal at a very cheap price, which is not practically possible. So, in fact, many of these problems are man-made. They're a question of having more pragmatic policies so that we can solve our energy crisis and have 24/7 power available in India going forward.
Right. Soma, let me get a broader sense from you. I mean, how are you seeing it from an industry, in this case, of course, an industry association, but industry is a large consumer of power. Unpredictability of power has led industry to build its own captive capacity, and that, of course, adds to capital cost, but it also makes the whole process far more inefficient. What's your sense on where we stand as a consumer or a large consumer of electricity?
You are bang on, Govind, when you say that industry has been taking recourse to captive mine and captive projects, because this phenomena, in fact, it's interesting that we are having a panel of people who have been in this sector for the last 15 years. We've been talking to them, and therefore I'm amused when Mr. Singh says that a blackout will really not happen, because that's really the case. Every time we hear that there is a crisis, we really don't have a huge blackout until it's a grid failure. So somehow or the other, it has managed. We've had captive power plants come up, or some hit and try methods, and we've been able to overcome the crisis. But if you look at it from a long-term point of view or a mid-term point of view, most consumers, and particularly heavy large consumers like industries, have to have their own backup through captive generation. And in most cases, as we know, they run on inefficient fuel like diesel or naphtha, as it was the case earlier. Some of them are taking recourse to imported coal now, but that surely is not the way forward. And therefore, if you look at it from the consumer point of view, and particularly power intensive companies, they're always at this verge of whether they will get power supply or not. And unfortunately, that is the case across states now. So earlier, at least, we had the distinction of some states which were better off than the others. I think the case has worsened over the years as far as this has happened. And two is, from a longer point of view, I really agree that India cannot do without coal. Coal will remain the main, backbone of our fuel for power. And we need to start recognizing that imported coal for the short to medium term, that is at least next 1 to 3 years, is going to be the recourse, and therefore we have to pay the right price for it. Yesterday I heard that Andaman, which imports all its diesel for power, industrial consumers there pay 27 rupees a unit. I mean, that is phenomenal if you look at the rates. But industry is willing to pay even that just to get regular power for their plants. So I think, and all this is leading to an input cost which ultimately the consumer, as you and me, or the economy bears. And that is something we need to keep in mind when we are looking at power costs.
Okay. Mr. Singh, let me come back to you. I think so. The sense I'm getting is that we are obviously living on the edge, and while we seem to have sustained ourselves or somehow survived despite living on the edge, the fact is that this cannot be a way to go forward. Now, we'll come to the coal part in a moment, because coal is the sort of root problem, perhaps at least for most of the thermal power generation that we're talking about. But let's understand what are the other issues that are at play when it comes to the fact that either there's not enough power being generated, or if it's being generated, it's not being transmitted in the right way or the most efficient way to where it should be.
Are you asking me this question?
Yes.
Yes, the second part is correct to some extent. Coal is an issue, and it will remain an issue, because after all, it is a populous country, and India lives in villages and forests, not in big cities. So therefore, it will remain a problem. The coal issue has to be resolved, whether by increasing internal production or by importing. But let me tell you, coal is not the only solution for addressing the issue of power shortage. It has to be backed by nuclear power, hydro. In fact, hydro, we have debated along, we have not acted on that. This is the time we must act on hydro. Whether it is corporate world or the government, both of them have to act. Nuclear, yes, this is the area which we should mobilize ourselves, and a lot of the job is being done, good work by the government, it should be done. And the most important solution, let me tell you, is expansion of solar plants. It is not only that rooftop will do, we have to go for huge solar plants, and for that we have to have the transmission lines, matching transmission lines. We should have distributed generation of solar. So that is the only solution for India to immediately address this issue. Somehow, people are trying to, slow down its growth, citing high price and technology, that tomorrow a cheaper technology will come. Let me remind you that whatever thermal power plant, coal plant, we are talking of supercritical or ultra critical plant, it has taken 100 years to come to this technology level. The price of coal power plants has not gone down, it has gone up. Whereas in case of solar, it is going down. It doesn't mean that we should wait indefinitely, and till then we should not embark in a big way on solar power plant. This will help in many ways. One, that will have distributed generation, and it can replace, if we properly have set up big solar and wind power plants backed by biomass, it can replace coal-based power plants to a greater extent during the daytime by supplying power to villagers during the daytime. The advantage will be that you can conserve coal and use it in the night and peak hours. And moreover, the people of this country, the man who is on the streets and in villages, they will get engaged with the power sector. Today, the problem of power sector is, quote unquote, people are disengaged. You and I are disengaged. We think it is government job. No, it is not government job. Power is a serious business. It is not selling steel, aluminium, copper, or setting up any power plant. It is a complex system. It has to work under certain parameters. Therefore, the consumers, suppliers, and the carriers, they all must be engaged. Unfortunately, carriers and consumers both are disengaged from the suppliers. And ultimately, who gets the blame? The government. And it is logical. I remember in USA when there was a grid collapse in 2003, who was blamed? The government. Whereas government has nothing to do with the power sector in USA. It is all in private hands.
Right. Okay, Mr. Engineer, now if you were to come to the supply side of the problem, now one reason perhaps there is no fresh capacities because many power projects have faced hurdles in the last many years in coming up. Would you say that that is one key reason why we are also having a problem, or would you say that really is it really the raw material, which is coal, and all the problems that are related to coal, which are behind the current problem as we're seeing it?
Govind, it's not either or. It is in fact both. The first one is that the existing power plants should be able to generate to their full rated capacity with no restriction on availability of primary fuel, which, as we talked about, happens to be coal. And the second is, as the demand and hunger for power is increasing, we need to install additional capacity because the gestation period for setting up power plants is quite large. As we know, hydro plants take as much as 7 years, but thermal plants take a little shorter. So otherwise, we are always like a man running in debt from one post to the other, and we are always falling short of our requirements. So we need both. We need adequate supply of coal for the existing units, and we need new plants to come in. The proverb in this power game is you create capacity in anticipation of demand.
Okay, Soma, if we were to now look at some of the solutions, now coal of course is a big issue. We are facing a whole bunch of issues, legislative, policy, judicial, and which of course is linked to supply and the fresh supply for sure. Where do you think we should be starting if we were to look at solutions which are somewhat immediate, as opposed to saying that we will we should be investing in alternative sources or setting up more hydropower or nuclear power plants and so on?
So Govind, I think we'll have to start from where it is stuck now. So as of now, for instance, you have the judicial thing where you have around 46 blocks, as is well known by now, which are producing or on the verge of production. Now, first thing first. So if the judge of the judiciary were to pronounce them illegal as well, in the sense that they will be deallocated, as is being guessed, then the government will need to see that it's immediately handed over to people who can carry on operations, so that the coal that is being produced from them, which is almost feeding around 10% of the total capacity of now, can continue feeding that coal. Because otherwise, remember, we will run in a period where there will be no owners or nobody operating these blocks which are already producing coal at this point. Second is, for all those blocks which have been given but are standing deallocated now because the judiciary or the government has deallocated them because they have been considered illegal. I think the explored blocks, the blocks which are already explored with minerals, need to be taken over, given to Coal India or to an operating agency, not necessarily on ownership basis or lease basis. Just get in the miners who are ready to put in the money and mine the coal, and see that the coal can go to power plants who need them. But that too is going to take almost 3 to 4 years, if not more, because remember, those are not producing mines. The only upside is they are explored mines, so you know there is mineral and coal out there. So the first batch would be blocks which are already producing, to see that they can continue producing, get them to do that. The second block are those which are explored. See that you can get in exploration companies or at least miners who can take it up on an operation basis and do it for you, like MDOs. And the third would be to basically see that you start off the auction process. Although at this point, let me tell you, from the industry point of view, there is a huge doubt whether auctions can really take off and people are going to really bet big money on taking off new blocks, simply given that it's been a very, very difficult process to get your block into production, even if you had the license, or to just get the license given the local conditions, the other environment problems like the environment clearances, etc.
Right, and we're all sort of aware of that, and I mean that's much discussed. Let me come back to one more point which I'll sort of use to also get everyone's closing comments. Mr. Singh, let me begin with you. I mean, we've talked about all the challenges of generation of power, supplying of coal or sourcing of coal, whether domestically or internationally, in the context of a certain rate of growth, a certain rate of demand. Now, it is generally believed, expected, and hoped that the level of industrial demand is going to go up sharply. The level of consumer demand also ought to go up sharply. Are we then prepared for a situation not just to source the coal, but to even transport the coal to power stations, and then for the power stations to actually generate the power and then finally transmit it back to the consumers?
Let me tell you, I have gone through various reports. What it is visualized, I have seen Deloitte, McKinsey reports, and I have also been applying my mind. By year 2030, our energy requirement will go up by 2 times. And our import dependence will increase from present situation of 30% to 50%, which is clearly not sustainable. So the solution lies is one on energy saving, and the other is we should have absolutely free flow of power across the country, reaching right up to consumers at every echelon of the society. So the one is that transmission and distribution needs very, very effective project execution and its operation and maintenance. That is most important. And that can only achieve when, you know, we separate carrier from content, as it has been done in case of Power Grid and TPC. Power Grid is only carrier, not it doesn't carry, it doesn't own power plants. Similarly, in case of big cities and many small towns and villages, we have to separate carrier from content. That means the wire is to be separated from supply. The moment you separate wire, then small, even, you know, villagers, you and I can be partners in setting up transmission lines. So therefore, a lot of investment will come from the pockets of the people who are living in village and small towns and big cities. Therefore, it will become a real public-private partnership. And then supply, on supply side, instead of only big giants, big players, we'll have even small people competing for a local area to supply power. So real competition will come, and that will bring down the prices. That will bring the losses, because energy saving in this country, we have put as high potential as 20 to 30%. In fact, I am so surprised. I go to government offices. Now I go to private offices. I find that private sector is not wasting less energy in their offices than the government offices. There is no involvement and engagement of the people. If my office is there, I walk out of the office and air conditioners and everything is working. So therefore, there has to be a wholehearted support from the public at large in saving energy, one. The other is expansion of transmission line and distribution lines. Coal supply is an issue. This is being addressed. I am sure Honorable Supreme Court and the government will act with all wiseness, and this has to be addressed for sustenance at the time being. But for long-term sustenance, solution is hydro, non-conventional and nuclear energy. On all fronts, action is being taken, but instead of wasting our time in debates and unnecessarily trying to say and creating panic, let us see how wholeheartedly these hydro, nuclear and non-conventional energy can come up. Okay. Let me cite one example which will clarify you. See, in 2003-04, we made an announcement that 50,000 megawatt hydro potential will come up in next 12 to 14 years time. I am sorry to share with you that only 3 or 4,000 megawatt projects have been taken up. The reason is, one, that we have not built up the infrastructure. Nobody thought about the infrastructure. How a private sector, suppose, is doing a project of 15,000 crore and has to spend 5,000 crore on infrastructure, that project will become unviable. Hydro is a must. So therefore, this is the high time we should work as to how hydro project work should start. And we should not fail as we have failed in case of ultra mega power project. We promised that in 10 years time, 10 years back, that we will set up 64,000 megawatt of ultra mega power projects. Right. That means 16 in numbers. How many have come up? 2. Why? Because we started work without preparing for the project, and tender documents were half-baked. Therefore, all kind of problems we are facing in case of ultra mega power projects. And then the other thing, we talked about so much transparency that the system which was working, that also stopped working.
Right. Okay. Mr. Engineer, we started out by asking that, is there a likelihood that we could actually see blackouts? Mr. Singh is obviously disagrees with that proposition, and he says that we are not near that, and we've come to the precipice several times in the past, and therefore we should be able to manage. The second point, of course, is that this is something that has to be managed on the demand side as well, and we can't be only focusing on the supply side. And when we focus on supply, we should be obviously talking about more sources of power, which includes hydroelectric and nuclear. So, Mr. Engineer, again, as someone who's been on the generation side, on the supply side, how much of this do you think is practical? And again, given the fact that we are likely to see huge demand spikes, will supply even keep up with the demand that we are looking at as of today?
You see, I agree with RP when he says that we need not be prophets of doom, and it's not as if all of India is going to plunge into darkness. But since we have been teetering on the edge, you could get the odd occasion when certain areas face brownouts or severe shortages of electricity. However, I think we need to look at what are the pragmatic solutions to this crisis. And one of the things is, in very many places where state-held utilities have not been performing, the public-private partnership model has improved the situation. For example, if you looked at the distribution of Delhi, where I was associated with, a lot of improvement has been made by going in for public-private participation. So maybe what we need to do is the coal mining that's done by Coal India. I think as a start, we should bring in the element of public-private participation and bring efficiencies of corporate governance and operations into play when producing coal is concerned. That's item 1. Item 2, we still have weak links in our transmission systems, particularly connecting west to the south, south to the north, etc. We need to debottleneck that. And the third initiative we need to take is different sources of power come at different costs. Whether you look at gas-based power, you look at imported coal power, you look at domestic-based coal power. We need to have a pool concept where these different costs are merged into one pool, because otherwise we always say that this power is too expensive, we don't go for it, and then when we are in a crisis, we want to find a solution, which doesn't happen overnight. So if we took this kind of approach, a three-pronged approach of trying to solve the crisis, I think we will be on a much better wicket going.
Right. Thank you so much, all. We've run out of time completely. The question we started by asking was, are we heading for blackouts? Well, the answer seems to be no, but a guarded no. And of course, the solutions are all there. And we've not yet really talked about, or touched upon coal as though it is the critical component. The issues to do with coal are completely different. Instead, focus on some of the issues to do with either fresh generation or different generation, and more importantly, curtailing demand. That's all we have time for on India Hangout. We're going to be back tomorrow, same time. Thanks for watching. What happened? What happened to this thing?